Mr. Kent,
Yes, ma'am.
do you mind if we, do we have your permission to interview you and put it on videotape?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, we appreciate it. If you could just start by telling us your full name and when you were born.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Harry Kent Jr. I was born January the 27th, 1931, in Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay. And let's see, when did you come to Bremen?
I came to Bremen the first time, 1955. I worked out of Atlanta doing the engineering for the Bremen and Buchanan air plants. And I came back permanently in 1964. I left here in in the middle 50s. And of course I went over to, we lived in Guatemala a while and New York, and the last time I came here was 1964. It was it was October, I'm not sure.
And so you have been here since?
Yes, ma'am.
Since you moved back. What prompted you to move back?
Well, the company transferred me.
Okay.
I was working for our shirt company, and I was sent here to run a plant for them in '64.
Okay.
And I retired on an early retirement deal in 1989, on February the 28th.
Okay. Were you surprised when you got sent back to Bremen, Georgia?
No, ma'am, because I had met, with a lot of the people that were here, and the man that was head of the Bremen plant, Mr. J.H. Bell, he was killed out here by the train wreck. Hit him, killed him, and I was in the head of the engineering department for the Southern Division, and they wanted me to come back.
So they requested you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Tell me about the plants that you worked on in Bremen and Buchanan when you were here. In '55, you said?
Yeah, well, when I was first here in '55, of course, that's when I went to work for Arrow. And I was brought over here to run the plant, to run the engineering for the Bremen and Buchanan plants. Of course, at first I did it out of Atlanta because I only came a couple of days a week. And then it got to be more and more and more, and they transferred me over here in about '57, '58, but I'm not sure of the dates.
Okay. So before then you were commuting?
Yes, ma'am.
From Atlanta here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. How did you get to know Tom Murphy?
Well, I first met Mr. Murphy, Mr. Tom as we called him, back in '55. I went to the Lions Club meeting with Mr. Henry Bell, who was the manager at Bremen at that time. And I went to him, and he introduced me to Mr. Tom, and I didn't realize at the time what I was meeting. I was a young man of 25 or 26 years old, and I didn't realize what he was or who he was exactly. I knew he was a representative, or maybe shortly after he became representative, but I met him and I liked him because he was a country fella, but he was smart. I never met a man any smarter, but he was smart enough to know that people he stayed on the same level with the people he was dealing with, because that way he kept them as his friends, because he did magnificent things, but he did them on his own level. And he made you feel like you was just like him, but he was much smarter than most of us.
Tell me about some things that you noticed about him.
Well, I noticed one thing, that of course his brother James was living at that time, and he would carry James to the courthouse in Buchanan. Of course, the old courthouse is now a historic building. and he would carry James up the steps, back steps to the courthouse on his back. I mean, he would literally put him on his back and carry him up there. Now, James was smarter than anybody I've ever met. He was a brilliant man. And he had his own wheelchair that stayed at the courthouse, which was on the upper floor. And I said, that man, a man that do that for his brothers is pretty good folks. And but Mr. Tom he's the kind of guy that he would help you. I mean, no matter if you had a problem, he would help you. I can think of many instances where, I mean, people he didn't hardly know, but he helped them because they were his constituents. If you were a constituent of Mr. Tom, you was all right if you knew that. But every Saturday morning, you could go up to his office and get in line, and that made no difference who you were. If you got there first, you were first, and maybe the richest man in town came in, he's last, and that's what I like. But I went up there. I can tell you a specific case if you'd like to know. He helped all the constituents, and when we'd have a problem at the plant a lot of times with the people needing help. He helped them time after time. But I went to him in, I think it was in the 90s. No, I guess it was it would have been 99. I had purchased a Ford four-wheel drive Ranger pickup truck. And I had tried it, and it was a lemon. I'm talking about a bad lemon. The body would squeak, and Ford couldn't fix it. And of course, the dealer was doing everything he could, but he couldn't seem to get anything done. And we were on for like 5 or 6 months. And so I went up there one Saturday, and I was the last one in line, and I talked to Mr. Tom, my wife and I did, and explained the story to him. And you have to have seen this man in action to realize how powerful he was. I mean, he's the most powerful man I'd ever met in my life. But you didn't know that unless you watched him once. But he made a telephone call to Atlanta that morning, on a Saturday morning. And the man that's in charge of consumer services in Atlanta, and it's a different man now, he called him, and he couldn't get him. He asked his secretary, and I said, well, she didn't know, she would have to find him. And he said, well, you better get on to finding him. That's, I think, the words he used. And it wasn't just a very few minutes before this gentleman calls back, and Mr. Tom, he explained to the man what the problem was. What Ford Motor Company had sent up what we used to call suits, when engineers that just got out of school and they sent them down to, they knew more than anybody, they didn't know anything. And this guy wanted to change the frame on his vehicle in the dealership. Now you can imagine you got to take everything on that vehicle out and reattach. That doesn't make a lot of sense, but this suit, and I called Ford, they gave me a number, and I called Ford, and that's what they said they were going to do. So after talking to Mr. Tom and his conversation, he said, I'll take care of it. And I said, I know you will, thank you, sir, and I left. And Monday morning, I started getting calls from Ford Motor Company. You couldn't believe it, they'd give you anything you wanted. I ended up with, this had already become 2000 then, and I ended up with a 2000 150 LTD with leather and everything in it, and paid several $100s.
So they just replaced the
They were almost baked. Well, it gave me a better vehicle than I had because they couldn't reproduce the one that was last year's. But I mean, he did that because of the fact that, I mean, he did that for everybody. I mean, it wasn't me. Yeah, I knew him, and his daughter lived across the street from me, but that didn't make any difference. It was everybody. Everybody was the same. He didn't care. I mean, you'd see him at Stetson hat and pocket watch and a little fob on the side, and he was just good to everybody. But you know, if you wanted to be his friend, you were his friend. I mean, but if you know, the thing that has most amazed me in my life is I don't follow politics that straightly, even though I have served on the city council here and other jobs. But was the fact that the people in this area didn't realize what they had. I mean, they ended up getting a guy that couldn't shine my shoes to take Mr. Tom's job. What an idiot thing that was. This man had steel in and he had never done nothing for nobody because he can't do it. Mr. Tom he was so powerful. And nobody, you know, but he didn't run around telling people, you just knew. It was like a man said, if you really are a fine person, you don't got to tell anybody because they already figured it out. And that's with you.
Yeah. How, in your opinion, how was Tom Murphy beaten by this other man?
Well, a bunch of people decided that he wasn't doing the job that they wanted done. They wanted it done. And there was got to be a hospital situation involved at that time, and I don't know all the exact parts of it. And they got him elected, and it was a shame because whether you were a Democrat or Republican or nothing, you should have been known as what this man was doing for the community. I mean, he was helping people, and you have to be powerful to help people. I mean, you don't go to the dump to get a new sofa, you go to a nice place. And he knew what he was doing, and he knew how to do it. And it took a lot of years to find that out. But he didn't walk around and make people think he was powerful. He just was. I mean, he was. And I've seen him in action, and he was. But he didn't use it for him. He used it for other people. But I don't know why that, you know, it was a upheaval over this. But basically it was a hospital, and I didn't know anything about it when Tanner took over. I don't really know the whole story, but I do know that that was a problem, and how it ever happened, I'll never know. Why it happened, I'll never know. Some people are crazy. I mean, you know, they just don't understand. They put this boy in there, he's still in there. He ain't done nothing yet, never will.
How did Mr. Murphy take that defeat? Did you talk to him afterwards?
I talked to him several times. He and I, you know, but he outwardly he didn't show it, but I know it killed him. So it hurt him inside, but outwardly he didn't show it, you know, very much. But it was people like us that, you know, it didn't make you a difference whether you, now Mr. Murphy made a difference whether you were a Democrat or Republican, but it didn't make any difference to people. The people that really knew him said, how could you do that? I mean, you know, you're here in one of the smallest counties in the state and got the most powerful man in the state helping you if you need it. Now you can't get any help because the people that are in the office, they don't have any power. They don't know the right people. Maybe way down the pipe they might get it, but they don't have it now. Mm-hmm. And of course politics I think because I don't like politics because I think that it amazes me that a man could be kind of poor like most folks, and then go be in politics for 4 or 5 years and he got $1 million in his pocket. I don't understand that. It starts at the lowest level and goes to the top level.
Did you ever have any occasion to go over to Atlanta to the Capitol and
I was over there one time, but I went in and spoke to him, but I was over there for a different reason. I wanted to basically really to see his office, and that's the only time I ever went over there. I talked to him on the street, and Of course, he came over with his daughters that lived across the street, and I'd speak to him. I'd be out working in the yard, and he'd come over and talk to me and stuff like that. But I never imposed on him. I never asked him for anything nobody else, anybody would ask him for. I didn't want anything special, still never did.
Were you aware of other people who would go, when he was in his law office, go over and ask him to assist them with different issues and problems that they were having?
Oh, yes, ma'am, everybody did. And, most of the people that really knew him did it. I mean, I've heard people talk about it, and of course I worked a bunch of ladies and 400 or 500 women, and they all had problems, and they would tell me about him helping them out. And I mean, just in small things, he'd give them advice, that laws and stuff, what you could or couldn't do. And he's just a nice man. But now he was so powerful, a lot of people were in awe of him. But he didn't want you to be in awe of him, but a lot of people were.
Did you ever, when he was in office and there would be news reports like on the evening news, the local news, or were you aware of any of that?
Oh yes, I was aware of some of it, but I didn't pay any attention to it because I knew what was in his heart, and I didn't care about what anybody else said. I found out a long time ago that people talk about people because they like to talk. I didn't ever have any reason to talk about anybody because it never was worth anything. And that's the reason I lived almost 80 years old, because I had said a lot. But he was people like to strike out at people, especially tough people, but you don't gain anything by that. I don't think.
So a lot of what was being reported was you striking out at him?
Well, people like to say things about people they don't know anything about. And that's always been my problem. If I don't know anything about it, I don't care anything about watching anything on television. It's about something that 2 days later they'll tell me the difference. It's not so. For the past 2 years, you and I have listened to them talk about shovel-ready jobs that are going to be used to give people employment. In the last 2 days, you have found out that president of ours didn't even know what a shovel-ready job was, and there isn't such a thing, and he admitted it. But they've been talking about, but you lost over $800 billion because of it. I mean, that went into the stimulus. And that's people talking out of their both sides of the mouth. They don't know what they're talking about. I've never learned one thing from talking, but I sure have learned a lot from listening.
So this comes from the experience of just listening and keeping your eyes open
I've
over
looked
the years?
and I listen, and I got a lot of friends, and I listen to them. I don't care about being any more than I've always been. I'm just a plain old kid. My daddy and I grew up in the first depressions. We didn't have anything, but we didn't know we didn't have anything. And I got 3 children and 7 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren. So I'm real happy with what I've done. I got the finest wife that ever lived. Been married to her 58 years.
And where did you grow up?
I was born in Columbia, South Carolina. I came to Decatur, Georgia when I was 12. My daddy was a railroad man, and during World War II, they transferred him to Atlanta. And I joined the Marine Corps after I got out of high school at 17 in 1948. And of course, the Korean War came along in 50, and I was involved in that for 13 months in Korea. But I grew up in Decatur. Like I said, went to high school there, and I started in high school in the 8th grade there and graduated in 1948 and joined the Marine Corps. And then when I got out of the Marine Corps, I went to Southern Tech and got a degree in engineering, and I went to work for Arrow. And I never did have another job. I was offered other jobs, but I didn't want another one because I liked it.
What type of work did you do for?
I was first, of course, an industrial engineer. And then I became a plant manager. I was a plant manager first in Guatemala City. And I was the youngest plant manager they ever had at that time. And after 2 years or so, I came back to Atlanta, and I was a regional engineer for the air company for the Southern Division. And then in 1964, when Mr. Bell got killed, they transferred me back over here, and I stayed here till I retired early in 89. I've been retired a long time. I worked in Costa Rica for a while. They hired me back to go to Costa Rica as a consultant. I worked down there for a while, and then I worked in all of their plants. As you know, they closed them all up eventually because the garment industry was in China. This is a nice place to live, and we don't have to worry about. Now, I lived in Decatur. Now, I wouldn't want to live in Decatur today because I mean, you don't know what's going to happen to you. I like it here. It's quiet and it's a nice place to live. And the schools were good, and my children got good educations. In fact, I got a 27-year-old granddaughter with a doctor's degree in education. And I got another one that's got a sports medicine degree. So, I mean, the school system's very good, and they all went on to college and got their degrees and everything. And I like this place, and I like the people that are here. This town right now, and I've been involved in it for years, has probably got the best management they've ever had. And Mike and the mayor and those people, I mean, they're working like hard as they can to try to keep from having to raise taxes, and they haven't because of I mean, they're just good at it, and we got good people here running our business.
When you came in